All right, let's talk about the one question test. Today, we're going to try and cut through all that political noise you hear every single day with one simple but really powerful idea. Are you feeling just exhausted by it all? The constant division, the endless arguments online, it's like everyone's speaking a totally different language. If you feel that way, you are definitely not alone. It is just chaos out there. But here's a thought. What if I told you that underneath all of that complexity, your core political identity, who you are politically speaking, might boil down to your answer to just one single question? So, we're going to try a little test. And look, this thing is designed to completely bypass all the usual stuff. The debates about policy, who you're voting for. We're not interested in that. Instead, it's meant to get right to the heart of it, the core story you believe about how the world actually works. Okay, here it is. Take a look at the three options on your screen. The key here is don't overthink it. Just go with your gut. Pick the one that feels the most true to you, instinctively. Ready? Got your answer? All right, hope you have your answer locked in. Let's dive in and see what it all means. Okay, so if you chose option A, this first one's for you. Let's break down what that means. So your archetype is the good guy. Now, this isn't just some random label. According to the source material we're looking at, it's basically a core brand promise. The whole idea is that you're on the right team, morally speaking. And what's really fascinating here is the psychology driving this. Your main driver is what's called a moral identity. Basically, your politics are a direct extension of your personal ethics. You see the world as a big fight for justice, and your absolute biggest fear? It's being on the wrong side of history, being complicit in something bad. You generally trust that experts and institutions will, do the right thing. But there's a potential blind spot here, or what the source calls a hypocrisy. It's this focus on aesthetic morality, the performance of empathy, using the right words, the right symbols, which can sometimes matter more than whether a policy actually helps people in a real material way. All right, let's switch gears. For everyone who picked option B, your turn. If you chose B, your profile is the real American. The whole brand promise here is about something different. It's about strength, a sense of belonging, and really preserving a way of life that feels like it's constantly under threat. So, looking at this, you can see it's a completely different set of motivators, right? The main driver is tribal identity, this really fierce loyalty to your in-group, to your traditions. For you, politics isn't about justice, it's a fight for preservation. And the core fear? It's being displaced, that feeling of losing your country and its values. You tend to trust power when it's strong, personal, embodied by a leader who can really enforce those boundaries. Now, the potential hypocrisy pointed out in the source, it's that tension between championing freedom on one hand, while also sometimes supporting state power to enforce certain cultural or social norms on the other. And that brings us to our final group, everyone who went with option C. Your archetype is called the disaffected. And the brand promise? It's about as blunt as it gets. I am not a sucker. This whole profile is really defined by rejecting the other two stories we just talked about. This profile is driven by something the source calls cynical realism, the core belief that the whole system, the entire political landscape, is just a rigged game. It's all designed to help the people at the top. So the biggest fear isn't being wrong or your side losing. It's being played. It's being a pawn in someone else's scam. And because of that, all concentrated power is seen as corrupt, period. The danger, though, is that this kind of cynicism, which can be healthy, can sometimes become a kind of intellectual laziness where you just dismiss everything and mistake being jaded for being wise. So, how did we do? Did that feel accurate? Maybe a little too accurate. That brings us to the most important part of this whole thing. Why does a simple question like this actually work? How can it be so revealing? Well, here's the big twist. The argument in the source material is that these identities, they aren't really just political positions. They're basically consumer products. Think about it. Each one is a brand with its own target demographic, and it's sold to you as a way to cope with a world that just feels broken and chaotic. And this right here, this is the whole point. The huge, fierce battles we see playing out every day, they're not really about tax policy or the details of a healthcare plan. They're about which of these fundamental stories you've decided to buy into to make sense of it all. Each choice you could have made lines up perfectly with one of these powerful narratives. Option A, that sells you a story about morality. Option B sells a story about tribe. And option C sells you a story about finding the real truth, the one nobody else sees. They're basically just competing products in the marketplace of ideas. But this This might be the most powerful idea of all. These three profiles, as different as they seem on the surface, they don't just appear out of nowhere. The source argues they are all just different reactions to the exact same problem. This deep, underlying feeling that the very systems and institutions that are supposed to serve us have betrayed us. So the whole point is to reframe how we see this fight. We're constantly told that the big conflict is left versus right, the good guy versus the real American. But what if the real fight, the real struggle is actually all of us against a system, against a game that only gets stronger when we're divided? And that leaves us with one last, kind of provocative question to think about. This isn't really about which letter you picked, A, B, or C. It's about taking a step back and recognizing the narrative, the story that you've adopted as your own. So, take a second and really ask yourself, which story did you buy?